Picture this. You're standing in the middle of a storm, but instead of being battered by the wind and rain, you remain perfectly still, unshakable, like an ancient oak tree whose roots run deeper than the chaos above. This isn't fantasy. This is the power of mastering your emotions, and it's exactly what the greatest minds in human history discovered over 2,000 years ago. Right now, in this very moment, you're probably feeling controlled by something. Maybe it's anxiety about your future, anger at someone who wronged you, or that crushing weight of disappointment when things don't go your way. But what if I told you that every single emotion you experience, every reaction that seems to control you, is actually within your power to master? What if the key to unshakable inner strength has been sitting there, waiting for you, in the wisdom of ancient philosophers who faced far greater challenges than anything we encounter today? The Stoic philosophers of ancient Rome and Greece weren't just armchair theorists debating abstract concepts. These were men who faced exile, imprisonment, torture, and death itself with a calm that seems almost superhuman to us today. They discovered something profound. When you truly master your emotions, nothing and no one can control you. Not your boss, not your critics, not even your own worst fears. This isn't about becoming emotionless or cold. It's about becoming so emotionally intelligent and resilient that you become the master of your own mind, the captain of your own ship, no matter how fierce the storms around you become. Today, you're going to learn how to build that same unshakable foundation that allowed Marcus Aurelius to lead an empire, Seneca to counsel emperors, and Epictetus to find freedom, even in slavery. In the bustling heart of ancient Rome, around 170 AD, the most powerful man in the world sat alone in his tent on the Germanic frontier, writing in his personal journal by candlelight. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, commander of the greatest military force the world had ever seen, wasn't recording battle strategies or political maneuvers. Instead, he was wrestling with the same emotional challenges that plague you today: frustration with difficult people, anxiety about uncertain outcomes, and the constant pressure to perform. But Marcus had discovered something extraordinary: the realization that while he couldn't control the barbarian tribes attacking his borders, the political conspiracies back in Rome, or even whether he would live to see another sunrise, he had absolute control over one thing: his response to these events. This is the first and most fundamental principle of emotional mastery, the dichotomy of control. Marcus wrote to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about the last time you felt truly upset, angry, or anxious. I'm willing to bet it was because something happened that you didn't want to happen, or something you wanted didn't occur. Your mind immediately jumped to trying to control the uncontrollable, other people's actions, past events, future outcomes. But here's the revolutionary insight that changed Marcus Aurelius from just another stressed-out leader into one of history's most respected figures. He learned to pour all his energy into the one thing he could actually control: his own thoughts, judgments, and responses. When you truly absorb this principle, something magical happens. Instead of wasting your emotional energy fighting reality, you redirect that same energy into responding wisely. Imagine you're stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting. The old you might grip the steering wheel, curse other drivers, and arrive not only late but also emotionally frazzled. But when you embrace the dichotomy of control, you realize that the traffic is completely outside your influence. Getting angry about it is like being angry at the weather. What you can control is your response. You can use the time to practice deep breathing, make productive phone calls, or simply accept the situation and arrive at your meeting calm and composed, ready to explain the circumstances without emotional baggage. This principle becomes even more powerful when you consider the story of Epictetus, perhaps the most remarkable example of emotional mastery in human history. Born into slavery in ancient Greece, Epictetus had every reason to be bitter, angry, and resentful. He was literally owned by another human being, had no control over where he lived, what he did, or how he was treated. His master was so cruel that he once twisted Epictetus's leg until it broke, leaving him permanently disabled. Yet Epictetus discovered something that his master despite all his power and wealth, never understood. True freedom isn't about external circumstances, it's about the freedom of your mind. While his body was enslaved, Epictetus's mind soared free. He realized that his master could chain his body, force him to work, even torture him, but there was one sanctuary that remained completely his own, his inner world of thoughts, judgments, and responses. No one can hurt you without your permission, he taught, not because he was naive about physical pain or hardship, but because he understood that the real damage comes not from what happens to us, but from how we choose to interpret and respond to what happens to us. When Epictetus was eventually freed and became one of the most respected philosophers in Rome, he didn't teach from a position of privilege. He taught from the profound wisdom of someone who had found inner freedom in the most constraining circumstances imaginable. You might be thinking, but I'm not dealing with slavery or war, my problems are different. And you're right, but that's exactly what makes these principles so powerful. If Epictetus could find emotional freedom while literally enslaved, if Marcus Aurelius could maintain inner peace while managing an empire under siege, then surely you can apply these same principles to your modern challenges. Whether you're dealing with a difficult boss, relationship problems, financial stress, or health concerns, the fundamental dynamic is the same. There are elements you can control and elements you cannot, and your emotional well-being depends entirely on learning to focus your energy on the former while accepting the latter. The second crucial principle of emotional mastery is what the Stoics called the discipline of perception, the recognition that events themselves are neutral, and it's our judgments about events that create our emotional responses. This isn't just philosophical theory, it's a practical tool that can transform your daily experience. Seneca, the wealthy advisor to Emperor Nero, understood this deeply. Despite his position of influence and wealth, Seneca regularly practiced mental exercises to prepare for loss and setback. He would spend days living as if he were poor, sleeping on the floor, eating simple food, wearing rough clothes. His friends thought he was crazy. Why would someone with so much voluntarily experience discomfort? Seneca understood something profound about human psychology. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Most of our emotional pain comes not from what's actually happening to us, but from the stories we tell ourselves about what's happening. When you practice reframing your perceptions, you begin to see that what you initially judged as terrible might actually be neutral or even beneficial. That job rejection that felt devastating? It might be redirecting you toward a better opportunity. That criticism that stung so badly, it might contain valuable feedback that helps you grow. That relationship that ended painfully, it might be clearing space for a healthier connection. Consider the dramatic example of Seneca's own life. In 65 AD, Emperor Nero, growing increasingly paranoid and unstable, accused Seneca of participating in a conspiracy against him. The accusation was likely false, but under Nero's tyrannical rule, the accusation itself was a death sentence. Seneca was ordered to commit suicide. Now imagine receiving news that you have to die, not from natural causes or accident, but by your own hand because of a false accusation from someone you had served faithfully for years. Most people would be consumed with rage, terror, or despair. But Seneca had spent decades training his perception. When the soldiers arrived with Nero's order, Seneca calmly gathered his friends and family. He used his final hours not to rage against the injustice or beg for mercy, but to continue teaching philosophy and expressing gratitude for the life he had lived. He faced his death with such composure that even the soldiers sent to ensure his compliance were moved by his dignity. Seneca had trained himself to see even this ultimate challenge not as a tragedy, but as a final opportunity to demonstrate the principles he had taught throughout his life. This doesn't mean Seneca felt no sadness or fear. He was human after all. But he had developed the ability to observe these emotions without being controlled by them. He could acknowledge the natural human response to death while simultaneously choosing how to respond based on his deeper values and principles. This is the essence of emotional mastery, not the absence of emotion, but the ability to feel emotions fully while making conscious choices about how to respond. You can apply this same principle to your daily challenges. When someone cuts you off in traffic, your immediate emotional response might be anger, but instead of being controlled by that anger, you can observe it, and choose your response. Maybe you recognize that the other driver might be having an emergency, or perhaps they simply made an honest mistake. Maybe you use the moment as a reminder of your own imperfections and extend compassion instead of judgment. The traffic situation itself is neutral. It's your perception and response that determine whether it ruins your day or becomes an opportunity for growth. The third principle that separates those who master their emotions from those who are controlled by them is what Marcus Aurelius called the view from above, the ability to step back and see your current situation in the broader context of time and space. Marcus regularly practiced this mental exercise, imagining himself rising above his immediate circumstances to see them from the perspective of years, decades, or even centuries. From this elevated viewpoint, many of the things that seemed urgent and emotionally charged revealed themselves to be temporary and relatively insignificant. Picture Marcus Aurelius in his tent, dealing with reports of plague devastating his troops, barbarian attacks on multiple fronts, and political intrigue back in Rome threatening his rule. Any one of these challenges could have overwhelmed him with stress and anxiety. But Marcus had trained himself to zoom out mentally. He would remind himself that he was just one person in the vast sweep of history, that his current troubles, however intense, were temporary, and that countless others had faced similar or greater challenges and persevered. This perspective didn't make him careless or inactive, quite the opposite. By reducing the emotional charge around his problems, Marcus could think more clearly and respond more effectively. When you're not consumed by anxiety about an outcome, you can focus your energy on taking the best possible action in the present moment. When you're not paralyzed by the fear of failure, you can take calculated risks that might lead to breakthrough success. You can practice this same mental exercise with your own challenges. That presentation you're nervous about. In 5 years, will it matter whether it went perfectly or just adequately? That argument with your spouse? In the context of a lifelong relationship, is this disagreement worth damaging your connection? That financial setback? Throughout history, countless people have recovered from similar or worse situations and gone on to thrive. This isn't about minimizing genuine problems or avoiding responsibility. It's about right-sizing your emotional response to match the actual significance of the situation. When you can see your current challenge as one chapter in a longer story, you're less likely to be overwhelmed by temporary setbacks and more likely to maintain the emotional equilibrium needed for wise decision-making. The fourth principle involves what Epictetus taught about the power of voluntary discomfort, deliberately exposing yourself to minor hardships to build emotional resilience. Epictetus called this training under difficulties, and it's one of the most practical tools for emotional mastery. The idea is simple but profound. If you voluntarily experience small discomforts when you're not forced to, you'll be much better equipped to handle involuntary discomforts when they arise. Modern life, for all its benefits, can make us emotionally soft. We're accustomed to immediate comfort, instant gratification, and avoiding any unnecessary discomfort. But this comfort-seeking actually makes us more vulnerable to emotional upheaval when things don't go our way. The Stoics understood that emotional strength, like physical strength, must be built through progressive training. Seneca practiced this principle religiously. Despite his wealth, he would regularly fast, sleep on hard surfaces, wear simple clothing, and walk instead of taking comfortable transportation. He wasn't punishing himself or rejecting pleasure. He was building emotional resilience. When real hardships arose, as they inevitably did in the dangerous political climate of ancient Rome, Seneca was prepared. He had already proven to himself that he could be content with less, that comfort wasn't necessary for happiness, and that he could maintain his inner peace even when external circumstances were challenging. You can incorporate this principle into your modern life in countless ways. Try taking cold showers, which not only builds physical resilience, but also trains your mind to remain calm in uncomfortable situations. Practice fasting occasionally, which teaches you that the discomfort of hunger is manageable and temporary. Choose to walk or bike instead of driving when possible, exposing yourself to weather and physical exertion. Sleep without air conditioning sometimes, or on the floor instead of your comfortable bed. These practices might seem trivial, but they're building something crucial: the confidence that you can handle discomfort without falling apart. When you know from experience that you can be content with less, you become much less vulnerable to emotional manipulation or panic when circumstances change. If you've voluntarily experienced being cold, hungry, tired, or uncomfortable, then these sensations lose their power to control your emotional state when they arise involuntarily. The fifth principle centers on what Marcus Aurelius called memento mori, the remembrance of death. This might sound morbid, but it's actually one of the most liberating and emotionally stabilizing practices you can develop. Marcus regularly reminded himself that his time was limited, that everyone he loved would eventually die, and that his own death could come at any moment. Rather than depressing him, this awareness freed him from petty concerns and helped him focus on what truly mattered. When you really absorb the reality of your mortality, many of the things that typically trigger strong emotional responses reveal themselves to be insignificant. That person who insulted you? In 100 years, both of you will be gone, and the insult will be forgotten. That embarrassing mistake you made? It will matter to no one in the long run. That opportunity you missed? There will be others or there won't, but either way, your time is too precious to waste on prolonged regret. Marcus Aurelius faced this reality in the most dramatic way possible. As emperor, he held what was arguably the most powerful position in the world, yet he was constantly aware that his power was temporary, his life was fragile, and his legacy uncertain. This awareness didn't paralyze him with existential dread. It motivated him to use his time wisely, treat people justly, and focus on the aspects of life that would have lasting value. You don't need to become obsessed with death to benefit from this principle. Simply remembering that your time is limited can help you maintain perspective during emotional storms. When you're tempted to hold a grudge, remember that your time with that person is finite. Is the grudge worth carrying? When you're stressed about a minor setback, remember that your life is brief and precious. Is this stress serving any useful purpose? When you're paralyzed by fear of failure, remember that the worst-case scenario is rarely as bad as death, which you'll face eventually anyway. So why not take the risk? The sixth principle involves the Stoic practice of negative visualization, imagining the loss of things you currently take for granted. Seneca regularly imagined losing his wealth, his position, his health, and even his loved ones. This wasn't pessimistic thinking, it was emotional preparation. By mentally rehearsing potential losses while he still had what he valued, Seneca accomplished two important things. He reduced his attachment to external things, and he increased his appreciation for what he currently had. This practice makes you emotionally anti-fragile. Instead of being devastated when loss occurs, you're prepared for it. You've already worked through the emotional adjustment in advance, and perhaps more importantly, by imagining loss, you become much more grateful for what you currently have. That comfortable bed becomes a luxury to appreciate rather than something you take for granted. Your health becomes a gift to cherish rather than an assumption. Your relationships become precious connections to nurture rather than permanent fixtures. The Roman general and philosopher Cato the Younger exemplified this principle during one of history's most dramatic political upheavals. As Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon and civil war engulfed Rome, Cato could have fled, could have switched sides, or could have tried to negotiate for his own safety. Instead, having long contemplated the possibility of losing everything he valued about the Roman Republic, Cato chose to die rather than live under what he considered tyranny. His suicide wasn't an act of despair, but a carefully considered choice made possible by years of mental preparation for loss. You can practice negative visualization in much gentler ways. Spend a few minutes each morning imagining what your day would be like if you lost something you currently take for granted. Your job, your home, your health, a loved one. Don't dwell on these thoughts or become anxious about them. Simply acknowledge that these losses are possible and consider how you would respond if they occurred. This practice will make you both more resilient when challenges arise and more grateful for your current circumstances. The seventh principle focuses on what Epictetus taught about the difference between what happens to you and what you make it mean. Events themselves are neutral. They become positive or negative only through the meaning you assign to them. This is perhaps the most practically powerful principle for daily emotional management, because it means you have the ability to reframe almost any experience in a way that serves your well-being and growth. Consider the story of James Stockdale, a modern example of Stoic principles in action. Shot down over Vietnam and imprisoned for 7 years in the infamous Hanoi Hilton, Stockdale was tortured repeatedly and held in solitary confinement for extended periods. He had every reason to despair, to give up hope, to let his circumstances destroy his spirit. Instead, Stockdale drew on the Stoic philosophy he had studied, particularly the teachings of Epictetus. He refused to let his captors control his inner world, even when they controlled every aspect of his external circumstances. Stockdale later explained that the prisoners who survived were not necessarily the eternal optimists who kept believing they would be released soon. Many of those prisoners were crushed when their optimistic deadlines passed without rescue. Instead, the survivors were those who accepted the harsh reality of their situation while maintaining faith that they would ultimately prevail. They didn't waste emotional energy on false hope or despair. They focused on what they could control: their attitude, their integrity, their support for fellow prisoners. When Stockdale was finally released, he had not only survived, but maintained his dignity and sanity. He had transformed what could have been 7 years of meaningless suffering into a profound test of character that revealed depths of strength he never knew he possessed. The imprisonment itself was objectively terrible, but Stockdale's interpretation of its meaning, as a test, as an opportunity for growth, as a chance to live his philosophical principles under extreme conditions, transformed it into something that ultimately strengthened rather than destroyed him. You face the same choice with every challenging situation in your life, though hopefully on a much smaller scale. When you lose a job, you can interpret it as evidence that you're a failure, or as an opportunity to find something better suited to your talents. When a relationship ends, you can see it as proof that you're unlovable, or as a chance to learn about yourself and find a more compatible partner. When you face a health challenge, you can view it as unfair punishment, or as motivation to take better care of yourself and appreciate each healthy day. The 8th principle involves what Marcus Aurelius called the discipline of action. The idea that once you've decided on the right course of action, you should pursue it without being attached to specific outcomes. This principle liberates you from the emotional roller coaster of constantly measuring your worth based on results that are often beyond your control. Marcus faced this challenge constantly as emperor. He could make the best possible decisions based on available information, but he couldn't control whether his generals would execute his strategies effectively, whether the weather would favor his troops, or whether political circumstances back in Rome would support his policies. If he had tied his emotional well-being to achieving specific outcomes, he would have been constantly frustrated and anxious. Instead, Marcus learned to find satisfaction in the process of making wise decisions and taking appropriate action, regardless of results. He could sleep peacefully knowing that he had done his best with the information available to him, even if the ultimate outcomes were uncertain or unfavorable. This approach allowed him to remain emotionally stable and continue making good decisions, even when previous decisions hadn't produced the desired results. You can apply this principle to everything from job interviews to relationships to creative projects. Instead of basing your emotional state on whether you get the job, focus on preparing thoroughly and presenting yourself authentically during the interview. Instead of being devastated when a relationship doesn't work out, take satisfaction in having been honest, kind, and committed while it lasted. Instead of being crushed when a creative project doesn't achieve commercial success, find fulfillment in the growth you experienced during the creative process. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to outcomes or not caring about results. It means recognizing that your emotional well-being and sense of self-worth should be based on factors within your control, your effort, your integrity, your growth, rather than on external results that depend on countless variables beyond your influence. The 9th principle involves what Seneca taught about the power of premeditation, thinking through potential challenges in advance and planning your response. This isn't worry or anxiety. It's practical preparation that reduces the emotional impact of difficulties when they arise. When you've already considered how you'll respond to various scenarios, you're much less likely to be overwhelmed by emotional reactions when those scenarios actually occur. Seneca regularly practiced this by imagining various setbacks and planning his response to each one. What would he do if he lost his wealth? How would he respond if he were exiled? How would he handle false accusations or betrayal by friends? By working through these scenarios in advance, Seneca was emotionally prepared for whatever life threw at him. When Nero eventually did turn against him, Seneca wasn't caught off guard emotionally. He had already worked through how to respond to exactly this situation. You can use this principle to prepare for everything from minor inconveniences to major life changes. Before giving a presentation, imagine various things that could go wrong: technical difficulties, hostile questions, forgetting your material, and plan how you'll respond to each situation. Before starting a new relationship, consider what you'll do if you discover incompatibilities or if the relationship doesn't develop as you hope. Before making a major purchase or investment, think through what you'll do if it doesn't work out as planned. This preparation doesn't guarantee that challenges won't be difficult when they arise, but it dramatically reduces the chance that you'll be paralyzed by surprise or overwhelmed by emotions you haven't processed in advance. You'll have a plan, which means you can focus your energy on execution rather than panic. The 10th and perhaps most transformative principle is what Epictetus called the discipline of desire, learning to want what happens rather than demanding that what you want should happen. This isn't passive resignation. It's a sophisticated understanding of how to align your desires with reality in a way that maximizes both your effectiveness and your peace of mind. Epictetus illustrated this principle with a simple but profound analogy. Life is like being an actor in a play. You don't get to choose your role. You might be cast as a king or a beggar, a hero or a villain, and your part might be long or short. But within your assigned role, you have complete control over how well you perform it. You can complain about your role and give a terrible performance, or you can accept your role and perform it with excellence. This principle transforms your relationship with everything that happens to you. Instead of constantly fighting reality and demanding that circumstances conform to your preferences, you learn to find opportunity and meaning within whatever circumstances you actually face. This doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up on goals. It means pursuing your goals while remaining emotionally flexible about the specific ways those goals might be achieved. The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius exemplified this principle throughout his reign. He had probably dreamed of being a philosopher, spending his time in quiet study and contemplation. Instead, fate cast him as emperor during one of the most challenging periods in Roman history. He could have spent his reign bitter about the philosophical life he couldn't live, or he could embrace the role he was actually given. Marcus chose the latter, becoming a philosopher emperor who brought Stoic principles to the practical challenges of leadership. As you stand at the threshold of true emotional mastery, remember that this isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus weren't emotionally perfect beings who never felt frustration, sadness, or fear. They were human beings who developed practical tools for responding to emotions wisely rather than being controlled by them. They faced challenges far greater than most of us will ever encounter, yet they found ways to maintain inner peace, make good decisions, and contribute positively to the world around them. The path to emotional mastery begins with a single step: the recognition that you have more control over your emotional life than you've been exercising. Every moment presents you with a choice. Will you react automatically to circumstances, or will you respond consciously based on your deeper values and principles? Will you let external events determine your inner state, or will you maintain sovereignty over your own mind? Start small. The next time you feel anger rising, pause and ask yourself what you can actually control in this situation. The next time you feel anxious about the future, remind yourself that your energy is better spent taking action in the present moment. The next time you feel overwhelmed by circumstances, step back and consider how this challenge might look from the perspective of years or decades. Practice the discipline of perception by looking for alternative interpretations of events that initially seem negative. Practice voluntary discomfort by occasionally choosing the harder path when the easier one is available. Practice gratitude by regularly imagining the loss of things you currently take for granted. Practice premeditation by thinking through potential challenges and planning your response in advance. Remember that emotional mastery isn't a destination you reach once and maintain effortlessly. It's a skill you develop through consistent practice over time. There will be days when you handle challenges with the calm wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, and there will be days when you react with all too human emotion. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Each time you choose conscious response over automatic reaction, you strengthen your emotional resilience and move closer to true inner freedom. The ancient Stoics discovered something that modern psychology has confirmed. You become what you repeatedly practice. If you practice being controlled by your emotions, you become emotionally reactive. If you practice observing your emotions without being controlled by them, you become emotionally masterful. The choice is yours, and it's available to you in every moment. As you begin this journey toward emotional mastery, remember that you're joining a tradition that spans more than 2 millennia. You're walking a path that has been tested by emperors and slaves, philosophers and soldiers, in times of peace and times of crisis. The principles that guided Marcus Aurelius through the challenges of ruling an empire, that sustained Epictetus through the hardships of slavery, and that gave Seneca strength in the face of death, are the same principles that can transform your relationship with every challenge you face. Your emotions don't have to control you. Your circumstances don't have to determine your inner state. Your past doesn't have to limit your future responses. You have within you the same capacity for wisdom, resilience, and inner peace that the greatest minds in history discovered and developed. The only question is whether you'll choose to develop it. What situation in your life right now could benefit from these Stoic principles? What emotion has been controlling you that you're ready to master? What challenge are you facing that could become an opportunity for growth if you approached it with the wisdom of the ancients? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's support each other on this journey toward emotional mastery. Remember, every master was once a beginner, and every expert was once a student. Your journey toward unshakable inner strength begins now, with your very next choice to respond rather than react, to master rather than be mastered, to lead your own mind rather than be led by it.